Hi everyone and welcome to a very quick edition of On the Whistle. It's been a while since I last spoke to you, obviously after that Coventry draw, so I thought ahead of the Millwall game it might be worth bringing you up to speed a little bit on all the latest news, particularly on the injury front, because there is a lot of it. I think it's fair to say that Millwall on Saturday I think is shaping up to be one of, if not the biggest tests that Sunderland and Régis Le Bris have faced this season, just because of the sheer number of players missing and who is missing. So we spoke to Le Bris at his pre-match press conference today. Bad news in terms of Alan Brown and Romain Mundle. I think it was kind of the worst kept secret on Weir's side, to be honest, but Le Bris did confirm that they're both facing significant spells out of the side. He expects both of them to be out for around 6 to 8 weeks. Obviously, they both got injured in that same passage of play against Coventry. Mundle is a hamstring injury. Brown actually fractured a bone in his leg, which is quite remarkable, really, that he came back on the pitch to try and play on. So a really big blow in different ways. Mundle's obviously been one of Sunderland's key attacking players in terms of his goal output. Brown has been so versatile, so dependable when he's been called upon. And when you throw it forward to the Millwall game, when you think that Trey Hughes, Patrick Robertson, Joe Bellingham are all suspended, there's 5 of Le Bris's key players really from the opening exchanges of the season all missing. Brown probably hasn't started as many games as the others, but even in the games where he's been on the bench, he's come on basically as the first substitute pretty much week in, week out. So I think that's a big setback for Sunderland. It wasn't all negative news by any stretch of the imagination. Anthony Patterson is fit again after that injury. Obviously, Simon Moore's done really, really well, and it's no slight on him. I think he's proven himself a really capable deputy and a safe pair of hands, but I think Patterson will probably come straight back into the team. I think he is Sunderland's first choice goalkeeper, and I think especially the dynamics of Millwall away, Patterson is so aggressive and brave in terms of coming off his line. And also, from set pieces, from crosses, from long balls into the box. I think that's going to be a really valuable skill at Millwall, and I think Sunderland will be quite keen to bring him back. And I think because of, I think it is a game where Sunderland's box is going to come under a lot of pressure, and I think having Patterson back is really important. Alexic is also fit again, so that's a really good news. He obviously hasn't played a lot of football for quite a long time, so will Le Bris chuck him straight into the starting 11 against Millwall? I think that's unlikely. But it is obviously a really handy option in terms of the depth of the squad, in terms of giving him some options to change it within the game. And obviously moving forward over the next couple of weeks, having Alexic back in contention for selection, both at left back and at centre back, where he played so well at the start of the season, is really good news. So there were some positives amid the kind of gloom. And I think it's really interesting now because no matter what Le Bris does in terms of his formation or his system, he is basically going to have to rely on players who haven't had a huge amount of league minutes this season. So his options, you've got Milan Alexic, you've got Adil Al-Shish, Andor Abdullah Bar, players like Tommy Watson, Harrison Jones, even in defence, players like Leo Yelder. So I think it's going to be a really interesting test of Sunderland's squad depth and also Le Bris's kind of ingenuity as a coach, really, in terms of how he finds the right blend. So I think that Alexic is probably the option that causes the least disruption elsewhere on the pitch, because obviously he's an attacking midfielder. It would allow you to keep that 4-2-3-1, 4-3-3 shape if you just move Luke O'Nien out to right back potentially. And so I think that is quite an attractive option, but I also think it's one that's quite unlikely. I think Le Bris has been so cautious with Alexic because he's basically explained it before as saying that, slightly different to some of the other players who someone signed in the summer, has been a language barrier with Alexic, which he's still getting to grip to. That obviously makes it much harder for him to adapt to a new league, a new team, a new culture. And while he really rates him and thinks he's a really gifted attacking midfielder, he's been clear that he doesn't want to expose him too early and potentially knock his confidence. And I think that given that he hasn't used him, sort of at home, coming off the bench against, Derby, Oxford, games where Sunderland have looked in relative control, I think it's a bit of a stretch to see him going in from the start away at Millwall. Could he come off the bench? Absolutely, but I don't quite see it. One of the other issues is that obviously Alexic hasn't been around a lot during the international breaks because he's been on international duty, whether that be with Serbia under-21s or with the Serbia sort of men's national team. That's amazing for his long-term development and shows you what a talented player and what a big prospect he is. But it's obviously meant that a period where he could be training day in, day out and really getting to grips with things at Sunderland, he hasn't really been around. So I think it's more likely either that Le Bris would bring in Al-Shish back as a number 10 because there's an obvious gap in the team for that, or I think potentially more likely is change formation a little bit and sort of get those strikers who've performed well at different times of the season all basically into the same team. I think the Al-Shish one's an interesting one because for all he hasn't had any league minutes of late, he hasn't actually played since the Sheffield Wednesday game in August. He has been training fully with the team for quite a while now, and Le Bris has included him in the squad a lot. So that would suggest that that he is very much in contention for section. He is an option. I think it's interesting though, because we know that Job and Roberts are going to be back after this game, which potentially then puts Auchiche back down the pecking order. And I think it's probably more likely that Le Bris will go with a slightly changed formation that includes players who've already been a big part of what he's done this season and who are potentially going to be a bigger part of things moving forward. So I think probably one potentially quite attractive option is to bring, say, Connolly and Isidore, play them together up front. Obviously, there'll be a lot of responsibility on both those players at different times to drop in and help the midfield. And that would potentially allow you to play sort of Watson and Meander as wide players who've been knocking on the door at different times this season or starting games at different times this season. Certainly Meander, someone you can trust very much defensively. And obviously also offers a lot of pace on the break as well. But that's how my gut tells me he'll go, but honestly I have no idea. I think it's going to be really interesting to see that team when it drops it at 2:00 on Saturday. And as I was saying before, whichever way he goes, we're going to see a big shift in personnel and formation probably from what we've seen a lot of this season. But to be fair, Le Bris was really upbeat and really optimistic. He said, he trusts all of these players. He's more than prepared to give them the opportunity. And, he's already picked his team, wouldn't tell us what it was, obviously, and he said that when he put it up on the tactics board in his office, he felt really confident about the different potential strengths that all these players are bringing to the fold. So certainly no negativity or pessimism from Le Bris, but it's going to be a really difficult game and really interesting to see how Sunderland go. So as ever, we'll have full coverage of that over on the website, and I will be back with On the Whistle sometime probably on Sunday morning, possibly Saturday night, depending how we go. I am now over on Blue Sky at Phil Smith Reporter, so come and find me on there. That's where I'll be asking for the questions for On the Whistle on Saturday tea time. So if you want to get involved, come and find me over on Blue Sky at Phil Smith Reporter, and I'll be putting out my usual call for questions after the game on Saturday, and I'll hopefully see you then for a debrief on what will hopefully be a brilliant Sunderland win. Let's see.